acting against consumers, DMCAing fan versions of their games while delisting multiple titles from their digital store, having persistent hardware problems, questionable monetization practices, and being literally one of the most litigious companies in the history of gaming. How is it even possible for a company like Nintendo to also be one of the most successful companies in the history of gaming? If it's such a problematic company with apparently no sympathy for its own fans, how is it even possible for them to keep breaking sales records all over the world? At first glance, from a purely rational perspective, Nintendo's success makes no sense whatsoever. But is that really the case? What is the truth behind the greatest Japanese gaming empire? One thing quite unique about Nintendo is how ancient the company is. They were there at the very beginning of everything, at the origin of gaming as part of the entertainment industry. It's part of their nature to pioneer their way into making video games. Their historical relevance is essentially unmatched. In the 1980s, a decade before the release of the first PlayStation, Nintendo already had the most popular console in the market. Their entertainment system was the first gaming experience a lot of people had at the time. Beyond the hardware, that was also the beginning of some of the most successful gaming franchises of all time. Mario, Metroid, Donkey Kong, and Zelda were all massive hits, becoming an essential part of Nintendo's brand over the years. And as far as I can tell, the strongest IP library in the entire industry. Of course, their merits were not limited to their first few consoles. The company has always been innovative enough to create unique products and provide singular experiences to its users. From the Game Boy generations and the massive hit that came with the release of the first Pokemon games in the 90s, to the family-friendly approach of the Wii and Wii U. Their way of thinking about hardware was always very different from the rest of the industry. Almost like they were always one step ahead of everyone else. That's one of the reasons why, when we think about the console war, we don't really think of their consoles. Nintendo is playing an entirely different game, and that's why they're still selling more consoles than everyone else to this very day. It is true that the company has always been pretty controlling with its properties, but as they grew over time, those controlling tendencies became more and more evident. Region locking, strict licensing, high prices, and rare discounts. None of that is a problem at first sight. After all, almost no company has this much value to protect. With how precious their IPs and overall brand are, the idea of doing as much as possible to ensure that ill-intentioned third parties don't take advantage of them is very understandable. However, what could at first be considered zealous actions from a company trying to protect its own IPs eventually became what can easily be perceived as anti-consumer or even anti-fan behavior. Nowadays, regardless of how much of a Nintendo fan you are, it's hard to disagree that the company has its problems, and we can point to many of them. When it comes to their fan base, they seem to care very little about their most passionate supporters. In 2016, two great fan projects, Pokemon Uranium and another Metroid 2 remake, were shut down by Nintendo. While it's true that the devs of those games were using Nintendo's IPs, their efforts were entirely focused on creating the best games they could. They were simply fans of Metroid and Pokemon, wanting their favorite franchises to thrive. Since the games were very well received by players, Nintendo could have seen that as an opportunity to engage with its own community and even make money by siding with the devs and helping them create official versions. Considering the Switch was about to be released at the time, it could have been a unique marketing strategy, giving both the company and the devs a chance to please fans and profit in the process. But apparently Nintendo never even considered that possibility. They decided to DMCA and shut down another Metroid 2 remake, and while they didn't go that far with Pokemon Uranium, the devs were still notified of multiple takedown notices by Nintendo's lawyers. After years of development, those two games were simply erased by the same corporation that could have benefited from their existence in the first place. These actions show that Nintendo might not truly care about its own legacy as much as fans think. The company has been criticized for delisting games from the eShop, making it harder to preserve older titles. At the same time that they don't keep keep all of their games available, they go after anyone trying to create alternative ways to play them. Nintendo's reputation as an extremely litigious company doesn't do them any favors. But that's far from their only issue. Since 2017, with the release of the Nintendo Switch, complaints about hardware issues, Joy-Con drift in particular, became common and persistent, causing enough trouble to enable a class action lawsuit against the company. Nintendo couldn't simply ignore the problem. Now in 2025, Joy-Con drift can still be a problem even with the Nintendo Switch 2. The difference is that now Nintendo added a clause to their end-user license agreement that apparently tries to prohibit users from filing class action lawsuits against the company, which just seems like an attempt to avoid potential future legal issues. And speaking of the Nintendo Switch 2, the release of the latest console came with other controversies, particularly related to pricing. Nintendo is one of the first companies to fully embrace the idea of selling games for $80, charging more than the industry average even for games that are essentially Switch 2 versions of older Switch titles. Obviously, charging a lot for older games isn't something exclusive to Nintendo. I can't even count how many times Naughty Dog have tried to sell The Last of Us remasters as full-price releases. But $80 for these games caused a lot of noise online. There was even an attempted boycott against the company because of the greedy monetization practices they seemed to adopt. But even with all the criticism, litigation issues, and overly protective policies associated with Nintendo over the years, the boycott failed miserably. The Switch 2, probably the least innovative console Nintendo has ever made, had the greatest console launch of all time, selling over 10 million units in 4 months. Games like Super Mario Odyssey and Donkey Kong Bonanza sold millions of copies, and the success of this Nintendo generation is undeniable. The thing is, this success might seem a little counterintuitive. Does it make sense for a company that apparently cares so little about its own fans to be the most successful gaming company in existence? Well, here's the thing. Understanding Nintendo's success means understanding the meaning of value. It is true that when a company makes decisions that are not good for its customers, they tend to lose money. Overpriced products sell less. People will often look for alternatives when they feel a company's offerings are not worth their time and money. But that's precisely why Nintendo can be so successful regardless of its missteps. Value is a matter of perception. If consumers still perceive what the company provides as valuable, they don't care about how litigious the company is or how expensive the games are. This is capitalism in a nutshell. Most Nintendo consumers never had any legal problems with the company. Most of them never experienced hardware issues. Most of them don't really care about game preservation or whether a game costs $10 more than others they're not interested in playing. At the end of the day, they're willing to spend their money on Nintendo products because, from their personal perspective, those products provide enough value. Nintendo can charge whatever they want for their games. As long as people perceive it as a fair deal, they'll keep buying. That's how the market works. Not every $80 game will succeed. Sometimes even free-to-play games flop. Price alone doesn't determine investment, and millions of players around the world are deeply invested in what Nintendo has to offer. Their IPs are some of the most entertaining and profitable in the world, and the company is smart enough to keep them as exclusives. As a gamer, I appreciate companies that make their games available everywhere, because accessibility means more people can play. But it's undeniable that exclusivity adds value to a brand's identity. It makes the company's image stronger and gives players at least one good reason to buy a Nintendo console over any other. Their games and consoles are emotionally connected to multiple generations, even entire families of Nintendo fans. Their first-party titles are reliable and timeless, consistently providing what fans want, and their hardware experiences are almost always unique. When you buy a Nintendo game, you're also buying all the meaning and the legacy behind the brand. It's an experience of trust and connection that few other gaming companies can replicate. Nintendo's success doesn't have to make sense from a purely rational perspective. Yes, the company has problems, but most people buying their games or consoles are not making a purely rational decision. It's also an emotional decision. Decades of trust, characters we grew up with, and experiences no other company can replicate. As long as that bond exists, they will always have a loyal audience. To a degree, Nintendo's success is a paradox. Nobody really knows how much better or worse the company will be in the future, or whether the trust consumers have today will exist tomorrow. For me, Nintendo will always be a company that I love and hate at the same time. And I believe some of you might feel the same. But what about you? Do you think Nintendo deserves all the success they have? Or do you believe what they create nowadays is not worth the attention anymore and players are just emotionally attached for no reason? Let me know in the comment section down below. But anyway, that's it for today. I'll see you guys later.